It's intriguing.
And then he tells me, you died twice on the table. Nasty blood hit your brain. You died.
It's incredible.
I was in this, it's an endless, misty white space. The very first thing I noticed was I had no pain.
It's engaging.
Then I was in this incredibly brightly lit space, and God was there. And there were some other relatives there that had passed on before that knew me.
It's inspiring.
Has your near-death experience changed your view?
I'm a whole lot more softer and caring towards other people than I was before.
You're now listening to Real Spiritual Talk Radio. Here's your host, Lamont Gates.
Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is a guest whose near-death experience can probably be described as a hybrid near-death experience. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me is near-death experiencer Julie Anderson. Julie, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And so, Julie, I understand you had an experience that probably took you outside of the world of your prior belief system, religiously speaking, that is. Is that so?
Well, in my religious belief system, we allow for the afterlife. We believe in it. And I grew up hearing stories of the afterlife and visits from relatives who had passed. And so as far as having there something that is larger and bigger than myself that exists after this life, that was not changed. It was not affected. But certainly what I went through was not something I had ever heard about prior to my experience.
Fascinating. And we're going to get into that experience, but you speak about a religion that you were a part of. Let's go backwards. Let's talk about that a little bit. Why don't you tell us what were some of your belief systems, religiously, spiritually speaking, prior to your near-death experience?
I was raised in a very devout Mormon household. My father was a devout religious leader, as was my mother. And I grew up learning the scriptures. I grew up with a very firm faith in Jesus Christ and in his atonement, and was fascinated from a very young age with the scriptures, particularly the Old Testament. Enough so that my graduating language in college was ancient Hebrew, and had consistently lived as an active Mormon woman.
So from a child all the way up into your adulthood, prior to your near-death experience, you could identify as being a Mormon.
Well, yes, and being a Christian and being a believer in Heavenly Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, and in the Holy Ghost. And I'll tell you, I'll share an experience I had with you when I was about 15. I was thinking about this last night. And I was in a religious class, and they showed a movie based on, I think it's Matthew 25, about a cobbler that was trying to get to a celebration on Christmas Eve, and he couldn't make it there because someone came who needed help with food, and someone who came who needed help with his shoes were broken, and someone came. All these people kept interrupting him, and he missed the celebration. And that night he had a dream about the Christ child. And this is a long time ago. I'm 62, and this is when I was 15. But he was basically told, you already did meet the Savior. And in his dream, he said, but how is that possible? And he said, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the one of least of these, my children, ye have done it unto me. And that was a profound moment for me in my life where I was so touched and so deeply felt the truth of this that I kind of decided my life would be based on doing it to the least of these, his children, and helping those that were in need, clothing the naked and feeding the hungry and visiting the sick, etc., etc.
So charity became a big part of your life in addition to your religious belief systems.
Yes, yes.
Fascinating. So why don't we move in to your near-death experience, and why don't you first describe to us how your near-death experience actually occurred?
I had gone through a divorce which just decimated my life, and it and then followed by a tragic death in my family, and it had thrown me into a pretty severe depression, the divorce and the death, and I needed to function. I had lots of people depending on me, and so traditional antidepressants weren't working, and so I sought out ketamine assisted therapy, and ketamine administered through an IV in a clinic that has proven results for depression, and almost a miraculous almost alleviation of depression. And so I sought that out, and I had 5 ketamine treatments. They were very helpful. I was on my last one. I bought a package of 6. I was on my last treatment, and as I entered the clinic, I was good friends with the clinic director because of my profession. I work in the therapy world. I had sent clients to her. And so she told me, we just got back from a conference. They told us at this conference we're going to get better results if we really push it fast. And I didn't really know what that meant, because that's not what I do for a living. But previous treatments had taken about 2.5 hours, a very slow intravenous drip of ketamine. So this one, they pushed it. It was about a 40-minute treatment. And so my experience took place during the ketamine treatment for severe depression. And I want to again say that I still send clients to go get this treatment because it is an effective, almost miraculous alleviation of depression. But I just happened to have a near-death experience during my last treatment.
Yes, indeed you did. And as I stated at the top of the show, it appeared to be a hybrid experience, which means there was 2 parts to it. Why don't you tell us exactly what occurred right at the tip of it?
Yes, okay. So in the first part, I saw myself, so my consciousness was outside of my body because I was looking down on my body in the clinic, and then I felt myself rapidly sucked up, I guess, into space. I don't have words for it, so I'm going to say a lot. Who has words for this type of thing? And I found myself like rapidly leaving my body, the clinic, the atmosphere, the universe, and found myself into a very black void. I didn't have the sense that I had a body. I had the sense that I had a consciousness, and I knew it was me. And immediately after reaching this black void, which I have since found out is called the void, other near-death experiencers have called it that, there were 2 entities, one on either side of me, and they were malevolent. I knew they did not have my best interests at heart. And immediately they began mocking me and telling me that nothing in my life was real, that my children weren't real, my profession wasn't real, my clients weren't real, my parents weren't real. Everything I had valued and sacrificed for was not real. Which I can't describe the despair that came with this. I had given my life to service at 15, and to be told that none of it was real, nothing that I had served, nobody that I had served was real. I can't describe the despair. And as they went on telling me that nothing was real, at one point they said that these two, they weren't spirits because it was black. I couldn't see anything. It was a void. But these entities said, your car isn't real. And I had been through a divorce. It had been a terrible, traumatic divorce. And I had I had actually lost the cars that I loved. One was a Volvo, and the other one was a little Mitsubishi convertible, and I'd had to sell them both in order to support myself through graduate school. And so I'd taken $5,000 from the sale, remaining from the sale of those cars, and I had purchased a just beater car that would get me to and from where I needed to go. Like truly a beater car. It was beat up, it was old, it was used, it had a salvage title, but I didn't want to have a car payment. So I paid this $5,000. I had a vehicle. I hated that car. I hated it. And so when these entities said, your car isn't real, something snapped in my mind. And then I heard my consciousness heard is real. And as a client of mine, one of the most lovely human beings I've ever worked with. He's schizophrenic and just the most lovely human. And when I heard the word is real, I knew that was real. I mean, it's a long story how he came to be my client, and we immediately clicked, and there was a bond between the two of us, and I knew he was meant to be my client, and he had been praying that he would get the right therapist and knew that I was meant to be his therapist. And so that's what snapped me out of this. Chad is real. And my consciousness had the experience that, yes, Chad is real. And therefore, if Chad is real, the rest of it is real. My children are real. My career is real. My family, my parents, all of it are real. And that these entities were liars. And at that point, then began part 2 of the experience.
Well, before you go into part 2, I have a few questions about part 1. Now, you said that this started off with the ketamine treatment that appeared to be rushed. You leave your body, and you said you went into space and then ultimately into some sort of dark void. Do you remember actually seeing anything as you were leaving your body, like the actual building you were leaving, the planet itself, and then it turned into a dark void?
So, yes, I do. I saw my body. I saw my body in the clinic as if there was not a roof over the clinic. I saw myself above the clinic. And then it just like became so rapid as I was like being sucked upwards, and it was an upward movement. And the next thing that I was aware of was just this blackness, this void, this nothingness.
And then you say that these voices or entities appeared that you could not see, and you referred to them as being malevolent, and they were saying things to you pretty much stating that nothing in your life that you had experienced was real. Were they talking in a malevolent tone, and were these voices audible, or were they telepathic?
So they were voices, but also a presence, and I can't put it any better way than that. They were presences. The voices were telepathic because I was not aware of my body or their bodies, but I knew I existed, and I could feel that there were presences. Does that make sense?
Yes, many near-death experiencers describe feeling a presence with them, even though they can't visually see one. Your experience here in this portion of the near-death experience is extremely similar to that of Nancy Evans Bush. She is an author. She also worked for IONS for a while. She had a very, very similar near-death experience to yours after attempting to give birth. She was clinically dead for several minutes, and she went into this dark void and heard these entities, but also saw what they looked like. They appear to be round and kind of like clicking or blinking and just telling her nothing in her life ever existed. Are you familiar with Nancy Evans Bush?
So yes, I stumbled upon her story last year. So my near-death experience happened in 2017. So, and I read hers last year, and I couldn't believe it. immediately called my son and said, you won't believe this. You've got to read this, because he's the first person that I called after I got my head together. And he kind of really helped me through the experience. And I could not believe the similarities.
And Nancy Evans Bush for a long time could not understand what she had went through. I mean, it jolted her into studying near-death experiences, in particular distressing near-death experiences. So I think she'd be very interested to hear that you went through something almost exactly the way she did. But moving forward, why don't you tell us about the second part of your near-death experience?
Yes. Okay. So part two, again, the language, my words are not going to describe it well, because it was very odd and very strange, and I don't really know how to put it into words, so I'll do the best I can. But part two, I was immediately shifted into a different space, and this space was very geometric. I saw the movie Soul this year. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie. I think Disney or Pixar, one of them, put it out.
Yes, I did. I just saw it this year as well.
Okay. And I was struck that, oh man, in a sense, they got what I got, in a sense. But anyway, I was immediately shifted into this geometric space. There was a high-pitched sound associated with it. It had all these moving parts. It was very metallic and silver. And again, I didn't see a body on myself, but I knew I existed as myself. In this geometric moving space, there were maybe 3 or 4 geometric beings, and I don't know how else to describe them. They were geometric beings, and they became aware of me, and I felt their gaze on me and their awareness of me. And they communicated to me, and again, not with words, this was a telepathic communication, that they were surprised that I was there. So a very Zen reaction. They were surprised that I was there, but they were going to totally accept it because there I was. But they also communicated to me that I didn't have the training to be there. And therefore, I wouldn't understand what I was seeing. And I must have shown confusion, because it was explained to me that I was witnessing an act of creation, and not the creation of the world, but an act of creation. Those are the words. I was witnessing an act of creation, but I wouldn't understand it because I didn't have the training.
Wow. So this act of creation, did you notice anything that was happening at the moment while you were there to try to probably give you a clue on what this creation was?
Not at all. No idea. No. I've thought about it since. What in the world, for all I know, it could have been a flower growing from a seed. I don't know, but it was it was definitely what I was witnessing was an act of creation, and I did not have the training to be there, so I wouldn't understand it. That was communicated very clearly to me.
Did these beings communicate anything else to you before coming back to your body?
No, that was it. And I remember that what I was seeing and where I was at, I didn't have awareness of having a body, but whatever my awareness was, it felt painful to me to be there. In addition to this high-pitched sound that was there in this place, there was not a feel. There was a feeling of just such total acceptance of the experience and grace and dignity, and that these beings had such grace and dignity. And they were geometric. I do not know what to make of it, but that was what I experienced.
So this is why I refer to it as a hybrid experience. In the beginning, and the first part of it, you felt a malevolent presence. And in this particular section, you felt dignity, grace, and acceptance. So in a sense, you do have a hybrid experience, which is usually heaven and hell, or distressing and peaceful.
Yes, yeah, that would fit.
So why don't you describe to us what it was like going back into your body?
Yeah. So the next thing I was aware of was a nurse standing over me calling my name. And there, as I opened my eyes, there was clear concern. And when I opened my eyes, she kind of ran out of the room. And I was, I mean, I didn't know this was, I still don't know what to make of it. It was so discombobulating that I just wanted to get out of there. So I took the IV needle out and put my shoes on and grabbed my coat and my purse and ran out the clinic. And I literally didn't talk to the clinic director until about a year had passed. So you're not supposed to leave for a good 20 to 40 minutes after a ketamine treatment, because you are somewhat dizzy. But I just had to get out of there. So I grabbed my stuff, got in my car. I didn't make it very far. I made it about a block and I had to stop, and I was violently ill on the side of the road, made it another couple of blocks. I mean, this went on until I reached my home, and didn't know what to make of it. I have, my oldest son is a very spiritual person, and later that night I called him and we talked about it, and he gave me a sense of what I had experienced that was very helpful.
So when you spoke to the clinical director a year later, did you ever determine what it was that happened to you while you were sitting there?
No, and my purpose of talking to her was not to determine what had happened. I kind of wanted to tell her about, the first five treatments were very helpful, and that sixth one, when they really pushed it, that I wouldn't recommend doing that again. And because I was still sending clients, and I will, because it's a very effective treatment for the right client, I wanted to have that discussion with her. And she sounded shocked and horrified, and maybe a little afraid that I would sue her or something, which I had no intention of doing. But apparently nobody else had an experience like that, because she was very surprised.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it was some sort of botched job. As you said, when you came back, you saw that the nurse was running off, but you didn't get
Yeah.
to get any. You didn't get to stick around to get any information from her because you pretty much fled yourself.
Yes, yeah. I just needed to be somewhere. I needed to be somewhere familiar. Where I had just been was so unfamiliar and bizarre that I needed to be in my own house. It was foolish, because I was still feeling the effects of coming down from the ketamine. But I just had to get out of there and go home.
Many near-death experiencers describe coming back from a near-death experience various different senses, if you would, or gifts. Some may, for example, describe feeling higher empathy levels. Some have precognition. Some are sensitive to time, sensitive to light. Some don't fear death any longer. Did you come back with anything remotely close to any of these?
So I feel like a lot of those kind of, I have been with me since I was aware as a child, and maybe possibly because I was born with a cord wrapped around my neck and not breathing and blue and born dead, essentially. And so maybe I've had some of those after effects from birth, but after this experience, first of all, it took about a year for me to be okay with the experience that I had, where I would be somewhere in a room or something and have to grab onto a table and feel the weight of it and say to myself, this is real. I'd be driving in my car and I would have to grasp the steering wheel and feel the feeling of the leather and tell myself, this is real. Life is real. I am real. And it took about a year to assimilate that and feel that, okay, I'm not living in two different places anymore. I'm living here in this reality, whatever it is, that this is reality, and what I can see and taste and touch and smell is real. And that took about a year. And then I have had after effects with electronics, definitely. I started a job at a new clinic, and just as an example, I'll put my clients in their appointments and it won't take. The office manager was like, "What are you doing to your schedule? I don't understand what is going on." And I happened to be sitting with her with my laptop once when I scheduled someone, and she could see that it didn't take. She saw me do it. She saw me hit save, and then saw that it didn't take. And so I'll have trouble with electronics not working the way they should be working. My computers will just randomly wig out on me. My cell phone sometimes will do the same thing. So I've had, and I've read that that might be an after effect.
Certainly, electronic anomalies are definitely something that many near-death experiencers report after coming back from their experience as one of many after effects. You stated earlier that you were a devout Mormon Christian for some time, all the way up through your near-death experience. Did you begin to think differently about your religion after this particular experience?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and so because of the traumatic things that had happened in my divorce, and then a death in the family, a traumatic death in the family, I had stopped attending my church services, and so I had really just turned to a more individual spirituality. Reading a lot and studying a lot, which I had already done anyway, from youth onward. And I started reading a lot of near-death experiences, trying to make sense of what had happened to me. And I think I kind of solidified a belief that we probably have many times that we come down to this earth, and we have many lessons to learn here. In a sense, the way I've made sense of it in my mind is that it's almost as if this is a school, and we come down to earth school, and we need to keep taking the classes until we finally pass. So that's been a change for me. The other change for me is that it'd been almost a decade that I had stopped going to church, and I have just recently returned to attending Sunday church services. And I had a lot of fear about doing that. And instead, it's been a really beautiful, pleasant experience to return.
I know you mentioned earlier that you told your son what happened, according to your near-death experience. Did you mention this to any one of your co-church parishioners when you went back?
Oh, heavens, no. No, I don't think there would be a lot of acceptance about it. And there are very few people I've told. My older son is a very spiritual person. I call him a hippie. He's kind of a hippie. Everything in his life is very beautiful and spiritual, and I love him for that. And he was so open to listening to me and putting words to what had happened. For instance, he said, "Mom, I think, you'd really experience kind of an ego death, the sense that you had a consciousness, but not a body, the sense that you existed outside of this reality." And I'm like, well, if that's the word for it, it was kind of horrific, but at least there's a word for it. That was helpful. And he was so open to believing me. And that was really helpful. And had some experiences of his own, taking some psychedelic drugs, that he could kind of understand where I was coming from. And that was very helpful. My beliefs that we probably we probably have different incarnations where we have lessons to learn. I don't think I would share that with anybody that was in my religion. They would probably think I was a heretic. And again, I don't know anything. I just know what my experience was, and that it hasn't changed my faith. If anything, it's strengthened my faith. And I've really been working a lot on gratitude for this reality, gratitude for my family, gratitude for being able to walk in the woods, gratitude for the mountains and the sky and the sun and everything that is here in this physical reality.
So it sounds like you're making good on that notion that your experiences here are real by strengthening your gratitude and basically calling those entities exactly what they were, as you stated, liars.
Yeah, they were malevolent. They were. They were out to hurt me. I knew that. And I knew that the minute I knew it crystal clear the minute they said your car wasn't real. I mean, it's like, what a mistake on their part. Because had I valued that car, that probably would have hurt me. But I hated that car, and I'm like, well, dang, I hope it's not real. And so, and then hearing the voice, but is real. You know, this client that his particular form of schizophrenia is he's not a violent schizophrenic. He's a kind and loving schizophrenic. But in his world, he walks in two realities. He walks in this reality here, and he also communicates with the spirit world in his reality. And why his name was the one that brought me out of it, I don't know, but I'm sure glad that it did, because it was a dark place. And I've read other people's experiences. That's how I came up with the term the void. I know other near-death experiencers call it that. I've read other people's experiences say the void was peaceful and beautiful and calm, but boy, that was not true for me.
So what would you tell others out there who may be on the fence about perhaps an afterlife or the reality of a spiritual continuation?
Well, there's no doubt, but I had no doubt prior to this, Lamont, that there was an afterlife. You know, and I didn't share this with you, but I will now. After the ketamine treatment and that near-death experience, I saw my great-grandfather, Beering, came in my room one night. I can't explain it any other way. And I didn't know who it was. And I talked to a girlfriend about it, and she said, "Oh, Julie, you need to go back in your family history and find out who it was." And so I started looking through photographs in my family history, and there it was, my great-grandfather, Beering. And clear as day, I saw him standing in my room and full of love and support. And so not only the near-death experience being something exists outside of this earth, but also that our family exists outside of this earth. And in fact, they are watching over me, enough to the point where my great-grandfather came to check on me and offer me support, and I needed it.
I would certainly say that that's a very strong after effect then that you also came back with.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your fascinating account.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Julie Anderson.
Real Spiritual Talk Radio.